Palmer,
Here.
Amy Riddle Swanson,
Here.
Charlie Schneider,
Here.
Angie Skillings,
Here.
Abe Smith,
Here.
Dominic Stewart.
Here.
Okay, quorum established. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In our mission statement, the school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong. Anybody have any suggestions on agenda order, revisions to the agenda? Hearing none, move on. Recommendations and accommodations. We have one. Lori Smith, come on up. How long have you been?
I don't know.
Oh. That's an acceptable
A
answer.
long time.
The Board of Education of the Menomonie Area School District recognizes Lori Smith. Lori is a strong advocate for students, staff, and families of Oak Lawn Elementary. She is giving of her time and talents when working with everyone. Lori has the skill for working through challenging situations and is always helpful with issues that arise. She is a flexible leader who supports her staff in both personal and professional matters. Lori's strength is listening to what is needed and helping to find a solution. She is caring and supportive with an ability to bring everyone together. Lori is a valued and instrumental part of Oak Lawn's success, and her work is very appreciated.
Retirement tour is starting early.
Sign up for your tickets now.
All right, our March highlight on you. The board members, you've all had a chance to take a look at anything in their job that I want to specifically mention.
I'd just like to point out that it was a great month. Obviously, having spring break, that makes it a nice month for a lot of different reasons. But there was so much student success to be proud of in the classroom, on the basketball court, on the hockey ice, gymnastics, DECA, forensics, science Olympiad. It was amazing, and I know I sent a message out, and there were a number of blog posts, tweets, and Facebook posts of all the different activities that our students were involved in. It was kind of a culmination of the winter season of activities, but then also a lot was happening with testing at the high school and so many other things that happened. So we have about 11 weeks to go. It's been a great run so far, and we plan to finish strong. But the March Highlight on Youth Report highlights a lot of these different activities. It will be shared on social media tomorrow, and we encourage everyone to take a look.
Thank you, Joe. Student representative communications, Katrina and Rebecca. Probably, yeah, come up to the chairs and maybe, yeah, that's would be good. That's perfect. And just remember, no mic, so speak loud. It's okay to use your outside voice.
There wasn't as much going on in the high school this couple weeks compared to the last event that we talked about. So to start off, DECA had about 12 students who tried to skate on February 26th through the March 1st. Two students qualified for nationals later in April for their school business entrepreneurs retail project, which is based on the information from the school store in high school. DECA also did the plunge on Saturday, March 4th in Eau Claire with the polar plunge, which supports the Special Olympics athletes. They raised $553 for Tiny Wars, a bake sale, as well as donations. Sadly, I didn't get as much submitted for sports. I just kind of did it off of what I heard going on. And because hockey had a really great turnout in state, and it was huge from both students and from parents in the community. every member and the just for instance team who competed at the sub-district level has advanced and qualified for the district level competition on March 25th. If they advance the district, they will qualify for state in April. FCCLA, so about 6 students competed at FCCLA regionals at UW Scouts, and they had 2 gold and 4 silver, all earned an opportunity to compete at the state level in April, which is at the Colorado in Wisconsin.
Okay, next we have science Olympiad. They are going into state next Friday. And then we have band. The band returned at Sunday evening from their spring break trip. It was an absolutely amazing experience. Students participated in once-in-a-lifetime activities and cultural experiences, including whittling at the minor rooms, bargaining at Mexican restaurants, ziplining through the jungle, swimming with dolphins and manatees, swimming with underground caves, snorkeling, and many other experiences. The band was featured twice on the ship, including an outdoor performance on the last day of the cruise, in which the group earned a standing ovation. The highlight of the trip was the band's performance at a K-12 school in Roatan, Honduras. Roatan students absolutely loved the performance. The band students interacted with the Roatan children after the performance. Finally, when it was time to leave, the Roatan students chased after the bus down the road. This was a trip of a lifetime, and we thank the school board and SCMA administration for supporting this incredible experience. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions, young ladies? Great, thank you. Have a great evening. All right, on to community communications. The opinions, beliefs, and viewpoints expressed by the various speakers during community communications do not necessarily reflect the opinions, beliefs, and viewpoints of individual board members, the board as a whole, or the school district of the Menomonie area, nor do they reflect the official policies of the SDMA. We have one this evening, Mrs. Earl.
I'm asking Suzette to pass out some documents to you. Is there a place where I can, where shall I speak?
Probably they're as good as any.
Okay. Joyce Euler, 1121 Evans Lane, Menomonie. A new rating system for books has become available. It is based on currently used movie, TV, and video game ratings. It provides at least a somewhat objective measure, so we can start having a conversation about content that is available to SDMA students. So now we have a standard measure, lists online of problematic books found in other school districts, and a link to the online library catalog of this school district. Using these tools, I have done a deep dive into the data and prepared this report for you. This report I am giving you is posted online at tinyurl.com/SDMAWI. Warning, it is graphic. Do not show it to minors. Actually, giving the material quoted in this report to a minor is likely a felony. But you do not have to worry because Wisconsin statutes give schools and public libraries exemption from obscenity laws. Today I give each member of the SDMA school board this report. It shows quite a bit of sexually explicit material in our schools. This includes the graphic rape of minors and mostly a lot of gratuitous sex between both same-sex and opposite-sex young people that is described in intentional and explicit detail. While this material is mostly found at the high school and middle school, it seems to extend in the form of audio and ebooks, even down into every elementary school in the district. We are talking about sexual material that when compared to movie ratings would be minor restricted NC-17 and X ratings. Most of you school board members were shown this material back in December. Only Angie Skillings has responded to any of my repeated emails or requests for meetings since then. Now you officially know. Now you are responsible. My understanding is that it is also legal for you to end community communication meetings, which seems to be on today's agenda, and to relegate your constituents to only speaking to you off camera when you feel like listening on topics that you want to talk about. Just because you can block our voice and give our kids access to graphic sexual material without parents' knowledge doesn't mean you should. tinyurl.com/SBMAWI. Please do the right thing. Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Earl. On to revenue and expenditure reports for the month ending February 2023.
Well, Leah Peters not able to be here tonight, but I did speak with her about the revenue and expense reports. Board members, I'm sure you saw some action. A couple things that Leah wanted me to point out. First of all, in the expense by function report, you do see some variances there from year to year based on one-time purchases and billings. Example would be curriculum. And then the expense by object report, it's the same type of situation, except this time with debt payments. And that just has to do with the timing of the payments when they were due this year compared to last year. But all in all, everything is in order. And Leah will be back on April 10th.
Any questions on the expenditure and expenses? Revenue. All right. Monthly employment report for February 2023.
This is a standing report item. Board members, you've had the report in your packets. Nothing outstanding there, but if you have any questions, by all means, please let me know.
I just want to say thank you for having a column up there. I think it's very useful to look at. And I'm really curious about, again, tracking that over time and seeing what the distribution of duration of employment for different groups.
Good idea.
All right. Moving on to the action to approve the consent agenda.
I so move.
I'll second that.
Motion by Carl, second by Angie to approve. Board members, you can all see that we have the minutes from the February 13 and February 27 board meetings, the financial reports, and donations of $1,294.28 Betty Geske Fund for Menomonie Athletics, and that's part of the Dunn County Community Foundation. Attachments there are the revenue and expense reports as well as the check history and minutes. Any questions or comments? None? All right, then let's take a vote. Okay, and the motion passes 9-0.
Charlie, what do you know about the Gusky Fund?
There's been a foundation set up, or a fund set up at the Community Foundation, and it's been a very generous fund that every year has earnings that go towards programming here this year. So we really appreciate it.
All right, motion passed. On to the personnel consent agenda. And in a motion,
I'll second.
motion by Angie, second by Rachel. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, let's vote. And that motion passes 9-0 as well. For the next two agenda items, I will be abstaining. I will leave the room during conversation, return to vote, and then leave the room again during conversation. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Carl.
The first one is approved CISA Pension Services Contract for 2023-24. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
And Carl, there's been no changes to this contract since the board reviewed it at the last meeting. There was a question last time, and Katie wasn't here to answer it. The question had to do with why do we contract with CISA 10 for some of the technology services. I was correct. And a lot of it has to do with us and our involvement with the Sync network. We talked about that last time. There is an addition though, we also have to EDA work with CISA 10. And the consistency of continuing that work is very beneficial, it's more efficient. So, again, we're making the same recommendation that the board heard last time, we recommend you approve the contract now.
Any questions or discussion? Will we vote? Not the grant charter that.
Okay, and that motion passes 8 yes with 1 abstention.
All right, moving on to the next agenda item, approve CISA 11 shared services contract for 2023-24. Is there a motion to approve?
And like CISA 10 contract, this one was reviewed by the board the last meeting, there's been no changes since that time. It's recommended the board approve the contract tonight.
Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, please Charlie back in.
Dale, you're in that come up. Would you like to give Jamie your voice? Oh, you didn't do that?
It looked identical to the last one.
Watching you come in and
Okay, and that passes 8 to 0 with 1 abstention as well. So onward to the MHS course recommendations with less than 15 students. Entertain a motion?
I so move.
I'll second that.
Motion by Carl, second by Angie, and we all have the list of courses that are being recommended to run with less than 15 students.
And again, this work was done at the last board meeting. There have been no changes, Brian, correct?
Correct.
So it's recommended again tonight that the board approve as presented.
Any discussion?
One item that that we didn't discuss last time, I'm just curious about, I'm just purely curious, how the community service course was used. How does that integrate with the programs and stuff here?
So that is a course where students throughout the course of the semester are released to go all Asian community to provide service with the supervision of the adult community. In some cases, it's within one of our other schools, elementary or middle level. Could be out with a service organization, a specialized project, or either community improved by the instructor on the front end. It's a great experience for our students.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, let's vote.
I don't know what's going on with the gremlins tonight. I don't know.
And that passes 9 to 0. So on to the discussion items. Review of early college credit program requests for fall 2023.
Brian will take this, but I have a couple comments I want to make before Brian speaks. This is a report that comes before the board every time this year. The board sees these types of requests twice a year. And we were actually talking about this today during the director's meeting. You can see that the number of requests is down considerably from recent years. And when I was asking Brian about it, he had a good point that in past years, our students would need to sign up for a lot of courses, hoping to get into just one. But more recently, students have had a lot more success signing up for courses and actually getting those courses, and sometimes getting multiple courses. So I think the pressure to sign up for multiple courses has gone down, which has led to our requests going down. If you look at the total number of students, that actually is pretty well in alignment with what we typically would see. It's just the number of requests that are down, because students aren't making as many multiple requests as previous years. But Brian, could you fill in the gaps just a little bit and talk about what this program is?
Yep, so, early college credit program, also similar in nature to the Start College Now program, allows for students to take courses either at University of Wisconsin-South or CDPC campus locally. They could do it at any university or technical college system, those are local ones. And as Joe said, our students have seen greater success in identifying the courses that they are likely to get into. I think that also goes in hand in hand with the work that our high school is doing with academic and career planning and helping to better align the information students have with their course interests. But primarily it's courses that we would not need to walk. So it's not just a student taking a class at either UW7, CDPC, for the sake of taking a class there. In many cases, it's for a course that we would not have enrollment numbers to offer, so it is a nice benefit for us. And typically, our students do find good success. They have a very high pass rate. It's very uncommon that a student signs up for a class, improves the class, and then is not successful.
I noticed a couple of here are not as local. I'm just curious. So there I see one for Eau Claire, and one for Madison, and one for River Falls. Are those online courses, or I mean, one of them is obviously something that will be offered in certain locations. So I'm curious how the transportation issue would happen.
Yep, so I would have to verify whether or not they are all online, the ones that are here in town. Transportation is something that transportation is necessary, falls to the family and the student, universal transportation. And again, that's not uncommon for us to have a new course.
Yeah, these also seem very specialized things that Scout and Jupiter is not offering.
Yeah, the only caveat is it has to do with Wisconsin institution for them to participate in this program.
Brian, is it necessary that it's not something offered by Menomonie High School? Like I noticed somebody signed up for Speak One.
So it's not an absolute requirement for participation, but that's typically been happening. Sometimes we will have a student who, for a specific reason, there is a unique course that they're taking in person in high school from a scheduling standpoint, would not be able to participate. But in most cases, it is a course that we will currently offer. So for example, speech really probably do have something to speak about currently. So if we need to take speech, this would be the way in which we would take a standing speech course. It's something that's currently being developed into our course. Yep. I should say, a speech course that has an ongoing.
Any other questions? Discussion.
It is just good to see the number of students taking advantage of it has trended up. If you go back to 2017, it was about 1,000, 10 to 1,000 for 2-3 years, and now it's slowly climbed up to closer to 30. And as you said, they're pretty much successful, so, you know, it's nice to see that there's students interested in learning some things that they do have to go out of their way to get, and they're doing well with it.
And on that point, the variety of products is amazing. It's
Yeah.
great to see
a lot of advanced students across all different, all different interests. And really,
I'm just wondering if the reason that there's so low numbers now, maybe because I think it really questions that the traditional college students coming down, there might be more openings from the class and close, and we see it quite a bit.
I was thinking the same thing, yeah, that has to have something to do with it.
Any other discussion? Review the 4K programming agreements.
So we'll be taking this one also, and every time, every year at this time, we bring forward 4K programming agreements for the board. As you know, we partner with different daycare centers in our community to offer 4-year kindergarten. We also offer 4-year kindergarten in our district, in our schools. But for the 4K programs outside of our schools, we have the programming agreements. And several years ago, we tied those programming agreements to the CPI increases that we use for our staff. And I appreciate Brian putting together what that would look like for next year. Brian, I know you've had discussions with the directors. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the board today?
the only thing that I would share is it continues to be a very collaborative process, wherein we have a timeline set up where we look at the current agreement, have a discussion about any outstanding items that need to be reviewed, tweaked, updated. Say for the last, we have 3 cycles and we've gone through. It's really been pretty minor tweaks. We streamlined some of our dates and things like that in that. But the current partners, we have, I think, a very positive working relationship, and we appreciate that this is a discussion we have on a regular basis, and we recognize that it is something that we're going through in the process.
I think one difference this year would be that the CPI is so high. Typically, the CPI has been around 2 or 3%. The CPI this year is running around 8%. I do think it's important that we acknowledge that the centers have seen increased costs due to inflation. But I would suggest perhaps that, the board take some time to study these agreements. And I think we also are continuing to work on our budget and our own staff compensation. And I think the board might want to consider where we end up with that as well when we consider these agreements.
Can you summarize the difference between the tier 1 and tier 2? Let us do the comment on there. So tier 1 and tier 2, there are a handful of things that are required by the state. Tier 1 aligns with the lower tier 1 aligns to more of what would be the minimum requirements, where tier 2 must require some additional pieces in there. We are required on an annual basis by the state to have all students participate in an assessment of their readiness in 4K through second grade. However, those assessments are designed during the course of the year. So the state minimum requirement is once a year, it will give it 2 months. At the beginning of the year, it will be required to give it 3 times. That is one of the items that would qualify for them to bump into that higher reimbursement rate. The other piece, we contract with Western Maryland to come in and do an independent evaluation of all of our sites, utilizing the environmental rating scale, the efforts tool. And there are different tiers within that system. So when we went through this process 5 years ago, we established a benchmark, and sites that reach a certain level that were above qualify for a higher tier. It aligns closely with what we consider a 5-star rating for a child care facility. There's some additional pieces that fit in that, but some of those pieces, and then also
Any other discussion?
Are the 4K sites going to be the same from previous years or?
Yep, at this point in time, and thank you for that question, At this point in time, we have had no indication that we will correct sites that they are not intending to continue directions.
But I do think it's worth noting what we do with the contract could impact what sites are able to stabilize.
Any other discussion? That'll come back to us.
Yes, there's one more question on that. There's been a lot of discussion about kind of a childcare crisis, and difficulty with daycare, and of course, Florida K is kind of that border between the early daycare and K-12 school. I'm curious if you have a sense of, are the 4K states we have meeting the needs in the community for people who want to enroll in 4K? Do we feel like we have enough 4K in this town, right, for what the families need?
Brian, if you don't mind, I would say that we have a lot of space for your programming. In fact, right now, our preliminary enrollment for next year is down. So we're hoping that more people will sign up. And actually, it was down a bit this year. So in terms of space, there's plenty of space for kindergarten programming. In terms of the daycare piece, that's a little bit more difficult question. I don't know if anybody else has any comments on that.
Do you have a sense on if it's down because there are some fewer 4-year-olds, or because fewer families are opting in? Like, are we getting kindergartners who didn't participate in 4K, I guess?
I don't think there's been a significant change with that, so I would say we've probably seen a little bit of a dip. But we're continuing to study that.
Any other discussion on that? Okay. Moving on to the step plan for 23-24.
First of all, I want to say thank you to all the members of the district who've had a hand in developing the staffing plan. This is a pretty heavy lift, and it starts at the building level and then works certainly with the different departments, and then bring it to the board. And there was a lot of changes, obviously, the last couple of years of COVID, and I think we learned some things. And for a while, we had a lot of staffing with extra custodians and extra people helping in our schools. And so now I would say the staffing plan has stabilized a bit. The board did have a discussion recently about intervention programming and decided that was important to continue with expanded intervention programming to help make sure all of our students can achieve as high as possible. So I would say there's still a little more intervention staffing than pre-COVID, but in terms of the plan for next year, you can see that we're looking at a very similar staffing plan to what we have this year. The additions that we're looking at, one would be one FTE for a school psychologist, and that's directly related to the mental health needs of our students and also the strategic goals that we have in our strategic plan. And then the second would be an additional special education teacher, and that's directly related to legal requirements and our requirements to provide services. When Tony looks at the staffing and does the caseload factoring of how much staff it takes to provide the required services, we are going to need an additional special education teacher for next year. But otherwise, you can see that the staffing plan is quite stable, and we think it's going to provide a really good result for the 2023-2024 school year. Any questions from board members?
Joe, is the district staffing summary box, it says teacher plus one FTE, what's above the high school staffing summary?
Yes.
Is that the same teacher FTE as the special education teacher?
That's the school psychologist. The bullet point right below that box.
So that district-wide staffing summary is really, should be labeled.
It says teacher, that's all.
Well, technically, the school psychologist is in a teaching contract.
Okay.
And we created this, and we created different buckets. We have the high school staffing, the middle school staffing, the elementary staffing, but someone like a school psychologist will work across the district, so we have that district-wide staffing category.
So to clarify, we have one special teacher and a school psychologist.
Correct.
So just add 2 FTEs.
Correct.
Thank you.
the special ed teachers in middle school?
Correct.
When we look at the FTE box and say, you know, peer educators at any of the schools, is that, you know, we've had, there's been a challenge of, you know, keeping peer educator positions filled. Is this the number that is the goal, or the number that you think is the actual, say, mid-year employment rate?
I would say that this is the number that we would budget for and that we would attempt to hire. Whether or not we can continue to have those positions employed for the entire year will really depend on a lot of factors. You know, certainly the unemployment rate and the competition in the job market for hourly employees right now is very difficult. I think Sam and her team have done a remarkable job. But you're right, there's been a lot of ins and outs, and hopefully that'll stabilize into the future.
So in particular, when we look at the prior year's number, that the actual number of people on the payroll, say today, might be slightly less than that number.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any other discussion on the staffing plan?
Are the particular job descriptions of, say, the school psychologist laid out clearly already, or, I know my impression, please correct me, is that the school psychologist positions tend to be more about needs assessment and evaluation of student student needs.
That is a, yes. That is a primary role of the school psychologist, is to do the obligation of the time that we have. They evaluate students academically, ability, mental health, kind of a broad range. Spanish, those evaluations, so the initial evaluations and also the opportunity to evaluate specialty students every 3 years. And so they facilitate those 3-year evaluations. That's a huge, it's a primary focus of a school psychologist and what a school psychologist does. However, there are far more different things that a school psychologist does in addition to that. They meet with students one-on-one. We have our school psychologists with board. They run groups, whether they're mental health groups, they collaborate also with our school counselors. They sometimes do activities together. They meet students and families to address mental health needs, help with growth, organizations. There are lots of different teams in the community. Today I was at our youth response team, and we have school psychologists that are on that team, helping to support youth in their needs, not only in school, but in the community as well. So they do a broad range of things, but yes, the primary responsibility is for the special education.
So I'm very pleased to see that the FTEs are added in these fields, and school, you know, the school psychologists and special education teachers have I'm reluctant to use the word pipeline, but the word that comes to mind, the pipeline of students who need this assistance, and we have resources available to them. One thing I'd be curious to look at in maybe more detail when this comes back is thinking about, you know, we had this long discussion several months ago about kind of when students need counseling with outside groups, or you know, where along the way our families or students kind of maybe don't get the help they need, at what stage of that process. Is it, you know, an assessment? Is it time in the classroom? Is it getting to an outside provider, et cetera, right along that that chain of handoffs that can happen? And so I'd like to know more about if these particular roles are the best possible way to help that chain of events, or if there's some other combination, right? So a little more kind of detail on why school psychologist is super important. Definitely it is. Why special education teacher is super important. It definitely is. What about other roles like, you know, mental health counseling or related fields in that same genre of needs for students?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and the distinction you made is very relevant, because the school psychologist is very important for our mental health goals, but like you mentioned, there's a lot of the special education piece that comes with it. And in this particular position, I would say it probably is more focused on the evaluations, the testing, and that type of thing. We are working also as well on a mental health package, and we're watching very closely at the state level. It sounds very likely that there'll be some sort of support for some additional mental health funding. So in addition to the staffing plan, you can expect to see, and that's part of our strategic plan, by the end of the year, you can expect to see some goals and potentially some suggested resources that may be needed to support what you're talking about.
Thanks.
Any other discussion on the staffing? Hearing none, let's move on to policy 187, public participation at board meetings. Dominique, would you like to tee this one up for us?
I'd love to. To clarify, I think there's some misunderstanding about the way that I put this on the agenda. I don't think that the public has access to the full write-up I did and reflecting on the agenda yet. But there's no suggestion of ending public comments at meetings. The school board has the right to do that legally, I believe, but that was not my. I don't have the ability to block or control what people want to discuss, so that also is not part of my plan. My reasoning for bringing this to the table was because I feel like there are some options that I wanted us to consider that could, one, improve the quality of the conversations that we have with people in the community, and two, also improve the efficiency of our meetings. I'm just the kind of person that I feel like our primary task at a board meeting is discussing our issues, which us as a 9-member board have shown over the past year that we like to discuss issues at length. And maybe on average, having the communications the way we do doesn't take very long. We've seen in the past over various topics that we are open to it taking much longer, which I'm always happy to listen to people, but when I set through the task, I kind of like to be efficient, and sometimes it can be a little rough to spend extra time before getting to the task. So I was just thinking of ways that we could, one, as I said, improve efficiency, but also the quality of our conversations. I would like to be able to ask some more follow-up questions occasionally. And so in my agenda item, again, there's no, I did include that theoretically there is a fourth option where we don't have an in-person thing, but I don't think that's the best option. People do always have the right to email and call and physical mail if you're into that. I do like letters myself. But I have three main options that I put out as ideas that I mostly wanted us to discuss it. It wasn't me saying this is one way that I want us to go. I had several options that I shared. So since I'm talking, I'll just keep talking maybe and give a quick summary for people. My first idea was to hold 3 or 4 separate meetings a year that are solely for the purpose of communication. For people to come so that our whole time together as a board is focused on listening and I think that would make that time more valuable. The second idea, I think maybe out now, just because this is where we have 2 board members present before a meeting, so that you can come and just directly speak to 2 people. And those board members obviously don't, give answers or conclusions or promises to anything, but you could ask some follow-up questions with gain clarity. And the third is that we change it so that if you're going to speak in person, that you do speak on a topic that's already on the agenda, which would help with efficiency, but it isn't necessarily my preferred option. It's just one that I thought. I think that's the other.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you have these three options laid out that you recommend that we discuss and come to a conclusion and possibly change our policy on what we do. I guess I would submit that the fourth, which you kind of ruled already, but the fourth that is viable would be to keep our policy as is. Right? So I guess with that, any discussion by board members of your thoughts? This is just for discussion tonight. We won't be voting on this or making any decisions this evening, just for discussion.
So are you saying with the three options that you put on there, and you referred to, I'm not saying this to you, but communications. So in our opening items, when we start a board meeting, would the community communications still be done and this would be above and beyond? Otherwise, we are taking it away.
Correct. I'm thinking of changing it from being at our regular meeting to a separate time.
Which would be option one, at a separate time. Yeah, well, actually, option two is as well.
I could see a potential like hybridization of the options where we went with option one or option two and our primary community communications happening at a separate time. But there was an allowance for comments on our community communication specifically on agenda items. Does that make sense?
I guess I personally think depending on what the goal of changing it is, if the goal is truly to be able to communicate more, have more of an opportunity or more venues to be able to have dialogue with constituents, taking the community comments portion off the agenda is the opposite of that goal. So for me, I think it's not a good idea, but I do like adding the option of having board members present prior to the meetings to speak with community members in effort to open up more of the dialogue with constituents that have concerns, and to get to know them and hear what's important to people. I think it's a good way, because we're already here, and if they want to come and talk to us, it's a good place. It's neutral, it's at the administrative office. I could see value in doing that, but I wouldn't be in support of changing the community comment portion for the whole meeting. There are some situations in which we are required to have community comments at, so then it would require the board to try to whether or not we have that and have all that well taken. I just think it would make sense to have at least that changes, but maybe have more opportunities to communicate with constituents.
I would like in my mind, I'm not seeing this as, if we remove it from the standing agenda item, I don't think it's taking it away. I'm seeing it as moving it somewhere else.
So if there is something that a constituent is concerned about and they want to address the board, now they have to wait until April when we have the quarterly meeting to address something that really may be pertinent to what's going on now, or, it just makes sense to keep it. I think it's gone relatively well, and,
That would get to what Rachel was saying. If it's on the agenda for today, speaker speaking to that, that's irrelevant timing. reason, right? If you said speakers in person outside of a 3 month, right, if you could build in the ability to stay agenda focused. I think certainly you asked what is the goal of the change, and I asked myself also, what is the goal of community communications? And to me as a board member, it is so that I can hear from community members. What it is not is a time for community communications to be a proxy for news media or speaking to others than us at this table. So that's something that I think needs to be considered as well. Under the efficiencies piece, sometimes we get the exact same comments that are spoken to us, emailed to us ahead of time. So we get the same message twice. It's not that no one's being heard, we're hearing it twice. And so I can see frustration of timeless when we've already have a copy right here. I can go word for word with what's being spoken. I know certainly we don't do a lot of back and forth during community communications intentionally with the time commitment that we have. So that lends towards the idea of 1 or 2 people being here before meetings, certainly. But I think there's a misperception in the public as well that just because there isn't robust discussion over and over again doesn't mean I'm not listening or hearing. I have notes on every communication that's been made in front of me in 2 years. I can tell you whatever day who came up with what they spoke about. So I think we do a good job of listening, and I appreciate the discussion about is there other ways to do this to be more efficient. But I go back to the purpose of community communication is for us to hear from our constituents, and there's multiple ways that can happen.
So, first of all, I want to thank you, Dominique, for putting this discussion on the agenda. So I think this is a conversation some of us had. I remember that first welcome to the meeting last April. We had the discussion similar to this. It's kind of like, hey, how could this work? And I think it's wherever this discussion ends up, it's really productive to think through how we do things, and if it's needed in a useful way, or if it would be more useful or altered in trying things, right? We always experiment and try things. So thank you for bringing it. I think it's a really interesting discussion. I don't know where I land on option 1, 2, 3, or part of 4, whatever. But I do want to reflect on 3 recent things that have happened. One is that I've recently had an email discussion with a constituent over multiple weeks, going deep into detail, back and forth, really getting into really deep kind of philosophical questions. And it was, I think, a very, from both myself and the person involved, a very thoughtful and inquisitive discussion. And that was, to me, extremely useful. And the back and forth, and can I think about this and respond and raise more questions and so on, was, I'm not just someone who likes to ask questions, right? It's how I think things through. And that was extremely helpful. Likewise, a few weeks ago, I had a parent in the district call me out of the blue and just wanted to talk for an hour about something that's happened to their kid, and part of it, the administration knew about, so worry. But they just wanted someone to talk to who wasn't a teacher or admin who cared about the school, right? And that was a really powerful thing. The person just call and say, hey, can I just bring up the situation and I need to listen? Right? That was really important. Another situation I'm thinking about is the case where we had a large group come in about pro-tastings. And that, I believe, the first time it was not on the agenda, but because of popular support or request, it ended up as an agenda item. Now, in that case, that particular topic had a lot of community support. I think that's a situation where if there are quarterly meetings that were set aside for, we're going to spend 2 hours this evening listening to what people have to say and really letting them dig into their topic, that would be a perfect venue for that sort of community expression, where it doesn't matter that it's today, but they want it to be discussed honestly and openly in public. So again, I know that those three things lead me in my conclusions, but those are three things that struck me as the kind of the best basic communications. And kind of learning, and to me, it's the back and forth that I think often our kind of 3 minutes in the tradition had is missing. And so I really like to ask people, like, okay, just pause for a second, explain to me what you mean by that, because I don't know what that phrase means to you versus what it means to me. Can we just dig into that a little bit deeper and think about it? And like, when I hear that, that's what I hear. Is that what you're trying to say, right? So I'm hoping we can find a way, whether it's one of these or something similar or something different, where we really can have, as a group or a subgroup, a little more back and forth, a little more honest, open discussion about what people are concerned about. And I think, having been someone who presented to the board a lot a while ago, I remember, furiously writing down, what would fit in 3 minutes, right? And trying to get every word perfect. And then it's, as presentations are, too, well, I know there are people out there, right? But it felt like we're talking to a wall because we're sitting here taking notes, listening, but there's no sense of engagement in a way that I think people are really desire. So if there's a way to build that engagement and build the feedback where we can hear and listen and respond and ask, I think that'd be really helpful. So that was a rambling discussion, but that's sort of what I'm looking for.
I would recommend too, if you have questions, you can follow Butcher over, you can follow up with the constituent. I know in the beginning of my tenure on the board, I did follow up with a few people that did speak, and I asked them, who is that person? And, what's the backstory, and I followed, and it is beneficial sometimes so that you kind of, your understanding of the perception of what they were saying or speaking is different, and so you always, as a board member, have the opportunity to do that anytime, just because it's outside or after the board meeting. Do that. If your viewers.
That may be true, and, and I get what you're saying about those deep conversations, but in my mind, it would be different for the whole board to hear those conversations as well, to know what, what's going on, so that we can work together as a board to be solved issues. Or, whatever, because remember, we're a member, we're some member, we can't promise them anything, we can't vote on anything, it comes back to all of us together. So I understand how long been discussions, but yeah.
With that, I think it was up now, right? And with that approach where it's, say, 2 board members, they're not a quorum, so they're individuals, right? Remind me, were they then summarized, did they summarize to the board what was discussed? There was some way that linked back.
Right.
It was like, was it at the meeting or was it?
Right.
So the meeting would start, and then if you 2 were the ones that were there, we had constituents address us about these topics, right? And at that point, if you wanted them on the agenda next time, it would be up to you or other board members. But there had to be that loop back for it to be valuable, otherwise it is just constituent talking to the individual.
But that's also not saving any time, because you are going to meet beforehand with people. They're going to give you their opinions or whatever they want to do in the communication. And then we're taking notes. We're probably not going to deliver the message the way they would deliver it or in a manner that they wanted to get across. And then we have to come back to the meeting and then we're summarizing it to the board. That to me doesn't make a lot of sense.
I don't think the intent, though, was to save time. I think the intent was to have more of a back and forth with the community member and then the board member bringing it. So I don't disagree with your statement, Mark. I don't know that it would be, that it would be all that helpful, but I think the intent was to have
All
a
I'm
back
saying
and
is,
forth.
I don't want you delivering my message. In summary.
I think part of that would depend on our expectations or the norms we establish for the summary, right? Like, maybe simply report back on the topics that were discussed, rather than the, like you said, what dialogue, right? But it might still save time, but I hate your point, I see what you think. Something.
I'm not worried about time.
Oh, sure,
Just
no.
just doesn't-
Yeah,
Yes, it
I was
makes
just
sense.
thinking about like, what is the process of reporting back look like? You'd be like, well, Jim and I talked about the budget and he shared his concerns and, and that's and maybe that encompasses 10 minutes of conversation, something like that. What I did want to say though, what something Abe said made me think when he was talking, when he talked about his process of getting ready to get up and speak and utilize those 3 minutes. And I think that one thing I like about options 1 and 2 here is that our current process really prioritizes or champions the people who are willing or able to put in the time that Abe described to like hone your words, figure out your perfect 3 minutes, and then get up in front of a group of people and make this speech, which is an intimidating process, because first of all, it's intimidating to speak publicly for many people, and then you do feel like you're talking to a wall. You do feel like you're not having it. Not that we're a wall. We all know we're not a wall, but you do feel like it's not a conversation. And I think that the potential for having more meaningful conversations, first of all, in one of these alternate instructions, but also hopefully allowing a place for people who wouldn't do that, who wouldn't come up with that 3 minutes and stand up and speak for 3 minutes. We might hear from a whole different constituency that way.
To Amy's comment earlier, when we are a board member speaking to a constituent or 2 board members speaking to constituents, I'm kind of reluctant because we're not acting as a board then, right? And I feel like we might, if we went with option 2, like we might put our board members, whoever they are that particular night, in a bad place because of that discussion. So personally, if we were going to go down this road, I would go with number 1, not number 2, to have the whole board there. But that's just my thought process, to not put a board member into a bad place. So,
And this is a board issue, but I'll just give you 2 cents after whatever, 16, 17 years of board meetings. One, I agree, Charlie kind of hit it when Amy talked about board as a whole. There's a reason why this board operates as a committee of the whole and doesn't have separate committees, because that was not successful here in Menomonie, because the committee of 3 people would work on an item, bring it back, and the whole board would rehash the item, and it really slowed the process down, is my understanding, why it moved to a committee.
Yeah, that's what they were talking about.
Right. So I would be cautious of the idea of having just a couple select board members representing the board, or even as individuals. I think you're gonna have to rehash the whole conversation anyway. Secondly, I think it's really important from the administrative standpoint that the board members remember what the board norms are in terms of following chain of command. In the board norms, in the policy, it talks about how the board is certainly eager to listen to everyone, but it's also very important that people follow the process that's set up. The last stop, not the first, will be the board. And, there are processes that we have in place where if someone follows the steps, and we try to start at the lowest level possible in the classroom with the teacher or with the coach or whoever it might be, have that conversation, and then if you need to get the building principal involved, that person gets involved, and then up to the district level. And if it still can't be resolved, which 99% of items are resolved that way, then it could come to the board for a hearing. And I can count on one hand how many hearings we've had in my 9 years here. So that's not trying to shield the board, but it's also trying to make sure we have efficient operations and not promoting end runs around the process that's been successful. So I think the board wants to be cautious there. The last thing I want to mention, in the first proposal, it talks about not needing to live stream. And, I don't know if that's one of the purposes or not, but one thing I would say is that if we control the district live stream, we would not be able to control any other live stream. And I don't know what Steve's intention would be or any other media person, but someone certainly could, have someone stream it on Facebook or whatever. We cannot control that. So if we have a public meeting, it may be meant to be more of an intimate setting. You can't control that. It's a public entity, and if someone wants to come stream it, they can stream it. So those are just a couple of my thoughts. The process has been pretty successful. Generally, our public comments have been less than 10 minutes. And when we have a major item, there are protections in place within the policy and rules of the board meetings that it's a guaranteed 30-minute period, but beyond that, it's up to the will of the board. So you never have to worry about going more than 30 minutes if efficiency is real concern.
Sort of boost, two things occurred to me that I thought back in those examples that I was discussing before. One is that in the situation where I had a long, multi-day, dozens of pages email exchange with someone about some topics. Yeah, I think none of the examples I was thinking of are really chain of command sort of topics as much as topics about principles and policies. Right? I think it's a lot of what we hear in communications, and that's I think that's a reasonable forum for those things to be discussed. But the problem with the individual follow-up is the issue that I have this let's say 15, 20-page email chain, and I'm actually I should not forward that to the board, right? For all sorts of reasons, right? Both personal and policy and legal and so on. But if even a shadow of that discussion had happened with a majority or partially or the entire board present, I think it would have been a much richer conversation in follow-up. And so I feel like there's a hidden loss here, that there's nuanced discussion we could be having about very important topics that aren't happening, because if it always goes to individual feedback, then there never actually is, as a whole, a discussion of kind of values and concerns from multiple perspectives at the same time. Can I get one person in one email chain that's never seen ever again, just walking that digital wall? So that was the first point. The second point is that when we think about the board operates, at the end of the day, the board operates by voting on policies that affect the way the district operates, affect the administrator's role, affect the budget, and if someone wants something to end up as an action item, right? How do they get it there? If they discuss it with one person individually through email, it's certainly true that person could write an agenda request and be on the next meeting. But honestly, I think that when we have two things tonight, right? So when individual agenda requests hit the agenda, and it comes from one person, everyone else is like, I wonder where this came from. I don't know what the context is here. What's their intent here, right? Whereas if the board as a whole could actually have a conversation with someone and really understand what their concerns are, and then agree as a board to put something in the agenda, that could be a lot more powerful tool for people to actually influence and have a sense that the board is actually listening and has some policy influence. So I feel like if you only reach out to a single board member, it's very likely someone who's going to have hit a dead end, either because of the social dynamics or because of the communication chain or whatever. But if someone did have an opportunity to present an idea, have the board as a whole ask some follow-up questions, take some notes, say, can you elaborate on that a little bit, a couple of minutes, then as a board, we could say, I think this is an interesting topic. Does anyone want to volunteer to write up a draft that we can just put on the agenda for next week, right?
So we had a constituent that spoke tonight that said she contacted every member of the board and none of them responded to her. Are you one of the people that didn't respond to her? And so she comes here and she speaks to us in public and no one responds to her. If you can't respond to her in private in your email, how are you should respond in public? So I feel like that's a little bit hypocritical to state things to me.
On that particular topic, I received one email from that particular person. It was on March 9th, asking me to comment on an issue on what she spoke on this evening. One email. Her comment tonight was she's emailed or discussed this with us numerous times, and that's not true. I haven't responded to her from March 9th yet, but I have not gotten multiple correspondence. So, some emails that we get, most emails that we get, I do respond to in one way or another. Some I do not, I'll be very honest with you. But I don't, but to say that we've been corresponding with multiple times, myself.
Well, regardless, if I'm just saying, if you want to have the dialogue, you had the opportunity to have the dialogue, and you didn't respond to it. And so,
This email was not written to all of us, it was written to those running for an open seat and CC to the rest of us. It was written directly to those people, and we were simply CC'd. It was not speaking to me. It's addressed to all current school board candidates. So I did not reply.
I
But
didn't
you
know
had
what
it
she was,
too.
I didn't
So you should
know
have
what she
idea.
was referring to. I don't know that she did contact me.
But regardless,
I'm just saying, I'm just saying, when you're talking about having opportunities to have dialogue, those are the opportunities to have dialogue, whether, you know, I don't know.
well, just like anytime someone speaks to us, any board member could then, at the next board meeting, suggest an agenda item related to whatever that person spoke.
And that has been done in the past.
It has.
It has. And so I think that, and that's why also following up with that board member to find out more about it, if that's something that, you know, you want to address with the board and have a board dialogue or a board discussion about it, it's important.
Well, I think one thing, you know, what that might be missing here is we already do have policy 187, public participation at board meetings. And it says right in there that any individual or group may request to be placed on the agenda for the purpose of making a presentation to the board. Now, it does have a caveat that not all those requests will be approved, you know, based on time and based on, you know, other things going on in the district. But there is a process in place already.
So
And I can't remember any that we've not allowed to come forward. Maybe one that was, you know,
Never mind.
So in that situation, the board would then have dialogue with the person.
potentially.
That was-
To wrap up a small part of that conversation, when that email was given on March 9th, I did carefully read through these documents, and I assume that they were ones or some of the were sent before. So I read through all of my, most of the links, was reading a lot of background, and I have not yet finished kind of processing the amount of material that's in here in my own head and trying to understand what it's really saying and where it's coming from. I definitely think there's one, I feel like this particular case is perhaps a little exceptional for the amount of rich detail there is that really requires some kind of big things. Go ahead.
I'm kind of probably contradicting myself, but at least I'm honest. I agree with the whole board. But one thing you might check out is I know that Elk Mountain is successful to have those two board members meet or however many they have that meet with the constituents before a meeting. Has anybody ever asked them how they do it and how it works? I mean, that might be something to check on too, to see how it's actually done and how successful they are and how they make it.
I thought like that region for welcome board member meeting, but it was brought up by, the gentleman from the law school, who was the president of Allen. Yeah, and I thought my interpretation of that, my understanding of that was in addition to, that was for maybe a constituent that had a question about something or wanted a clarification about something, or, you know, like it was just a way to communicate better, but that wasn't really but I didn't realize that was on.
Are you suggesting, Amy, that someone reach out to help out and ask out?
Just to find out what they do and, if it's something that's viable, and people.
Charlie is someone who
I'm not saying that you do, I'm just saying.
Charlie is someone who has attended maybe more board meetings than anyone else in the state. I'm curious, are there other novels that are not listed here that you've seen, or at least maybe not, good or bad, or at least intriguing?
The model that I see primarily is what we do, right? Some schools limit, some schools don't limit. Some schools, as in time, some schools also limit it to a topic on the agenda that night. But most, it's one of those two. There's a couple like Elk Mound that are different, but that's about all I've seen really. Some don't have any, because you don't have to have public comment, but most do. Some, believe it or not, allow all the way through the meeting, but that's a whole other issue.
One other that I've seen would be using our model, but putting it on the end of the agenda. I think that would maybe go to Dominique's point of, you come to a board meeting and you're all prepared and you're ready to address topics that you've been preparing for, and then you might get a community communication that is something that's totally different that you haven't thought about. It could be distracting, or, you want the board to work together when everyone's fresh and ready to go. But I don't think that lasted because it was problematic for the community, not knowing exactly how long the board meetings would go. So I would not recommend that, but that's another model that I've seen.
There was an issue, I remember who raised it about, there's a question in terms of access, of, who is available in the community at 5:45 on a random Monday night. And if there's ways to have public comment that might be easier to access for people who have different schedules, where you can't get, childcare to come to a meeting, or, we know that being at a physical location at a certain time is often, the key barrier to entry for lots of social interactions and social services. So.
We did have that during COVID quite often when people did not feel comfortable coming to in-person meetings. And in that case, we received written communications that were requested to be read to the board, and I know we've accommodated that request before.
I would also say that, like, part of our goal and part of, our pillar of parent partnership and community partnership is allowing that. Someone that they want to talk to us. And by eliminating that or changing that or moving that around, I just think that it just offers an air of, that they're what they have to say or what they might want to share that night isn't important. I think it should be something that is open to the community.
I see number one, having the 3 to 4 separate meetings a year as somewhat of a, call it a town hall meeting, if you will, in addition to a board meeting. I don't know how the board feels about that, but that's how I would characterize that.
I would feel most comfortable with that if the change was made that the meeting-specific conversation was agenda focused. Right?
Let me make sure I understand.
If we had the town hall,
Yeah.
say that every meeting should be restricted to the agenda items. Because within 3 months, right, there's non-agenda time for town hall. That said, there's still all the existing ways we have to request that a topic be discussed. But I'm not even saying we should change it, I'm just saying if we were to do that, the trade-off to me would be then let's shorten up some of the comments.
I don't feel like our comments have been, we had one maybe two better than the last overnight last 6 minutes, so it's not, and generally speaking, with the exception of COVID, I think whatever somebody's bringing to us at the time, and even when we talk about the legislative community issues, like there are things that come up that are maybe pertinent that may not be on our board meeting that they want to bring to our attention. So having that opportunity for them to do so, I think is they're right as constituents, and they voted for us. And so we should
I agree with what you're saying, although I think the intent here is actually to amplify that interaction as opposed to diminish it. So the way I read this, and I hope what I would like to see is actually more and richer conversation, not the attempt to kind of wash conversation, actually to make it deeper and more interactive as opposed to this sort of presentation departure. But again, I think there's the time trade-off is, can you put that in its own space where it gives the time it deserves?
But I also think that's up to the constituent, if they wanna have like a word presentation, and if there's, request that on the agenda, they can certainly do that if they wanna have their dialogue during that time. But if it's just a 3-minute community comment, they understand that it's their comment, and then the board is listening. And you know, like Scott last year talked about the National School Board Association, which is coming up on the agenda. And I think the following board meeting, we could have it on the agenda to reevaluate that as part of our policy. So those are things that do come up that are pertinent to what we're doing here in our oversight function. And I think it is easy to go too far, too far where it is, if you're not doing oversight anymore, where you're getting involved in a lot of things. So I think it's important that we all hear the same message, and we keep it open to the community. But I also think, if you have a question or a follow-up question, Joe can direct you the right direction if he's not able to answer the question or whatnot. With constituents too, I follow up with some people, and like, what did you mean by that, or how, and it provides clarity for me when I'm making a decision.
Dominique, you brought this up tonight. Are you hearing any consensus or any coalescing around any of your ideas that you would want to bring forward?
No, I'm not even sure we're circling around like what my intention is. To answer your question.
Do you want to further describe your intent, or?
So it sort of sounds, okay, let me back up. To summarize, I think we're all saying that we value community input. And we value the way we've been doing it to some degree. And maybe sort of we're floating the idea of ways to add more that would allow for deeper conversation. Which I think, it wasn't my intent to make more commitment for board members. I'm fine with it, I suppose, to some degree. I still feel like if we went with something like one, I would be fine with just one. I would also, I guess, be fine with 1 and 3. That was mentioned. But I do want to make it clear, it was not, in any of these scenarios, it was not my intent to take away anyone's opportunity to speak to the board. Because obviously, as you mentioned, we do have conversations by email, and also I also brought it on that one to the one of my district and phone calls and snail mail. Happy to listen to it. But I was just looking at a different way to do in-person stuff. It's not about anything. None of these options eliminate communication. It is not. So I think that's like I'll value it. Maybe we would be okay with like a 1 and 2 situation, or just adding one to where it's happening. But I don't know really exactly how people feel about that.
I would guess that much that your frustration of mine is, when somebody comes up and does talk for 3 minutes, it would be really nice sometimes to be able to say something in response. And I know we don't do that. The only recourse they have is, say, if you want a board member, or not a board member, but an administrator, or somebody to get back to you on your question or concern. That's basically it. And I think in a board meeting, like you said, efficiency sometimes, if we were to do that business where somebody gets up and talks and speaks, and somebody comes up and says, that's that means it's efficient, but at the same time, when somebody speaks or says something or accuses the board of something, and they know that's not true. And I don't even know if that's even a place to go, because I certainly don't want to start shouting at you that, or you said, or I heard, or, whatever, or you didn't know me, you don't want to forget it, but there has to be some kind of balance. I don't know.
The
I
policy,
enjoyed that you did.
the policy existing states board members may briefly question for clarification, or the board may briefly discuss matters raised by the public during this portion of the meeting, but the board shall not act on such matters or discuss the items in more detail unless topics are specifically listed on the printed agenda for the meeting. So it's a fine line, I'm sure, between a small mention of a thing and a now you broke an open meeting or a notification of meeting laws type of discussion.
And the way we discuss them is, I'm guessing, to very quickly, it needs to be crossed over.
Yeah, and that's not only do you have to consider the open meetings law, we also have to consider best practice from the school board association. And I think the difficulty of this for our board members, I think we've all done a nice job of, resisting the temptation to get into a dialogue on items that are not posted. And that's one thing to point out, whether it's a town hall meeting or whatever, the board, when you gather with, you're still subject to the open meetings law. And I will say that we have had in the past, we've had some community dialogue on particular topics. And, I don't know that we necessarily need to do a standing agenda item where we're gonna designate, 4 Mondays or 1 quarter. If there's a topic, that's rising to a level where we feel like there needs to be some sort of community forum, we can do that, and we have done that. The only 2 standing ones that we have right now are the mid-year budget hearing in January, and then also the annual meeting. The annual meeting is a little more of a wide open agenda based on the nature of the annual meeting, whereas the budget meeting is more focused on district finances. But we have had things in the past. I know years ago, we had an issue about religion in schools. We had a special forum where there was a lot of communication, there was a lot of discussion. That can happen if we schedule it and if the board feels that that's something that's necessary.
But the point of that is, it can't be a free-for-all.
Correct.
It has to be scheduled with an agenda
Yes.
of what you're going to speak of at that particular meeting.
Even though the county, I think if we wanted to go the direction of a town forum or this kind of option 1 special meeting, I think there's still ways you can make it have a posted agenda and still be, you could ask people to submit, 36 hours in advance, 1-sentence summary or a 2-word summary of what they want to discuss, simply so that we can post an agenda of these topics for the discussion. And that, there's ways I'm sure to make that on the correct side of the meeting. Not that I advocate that, because I think it's possible. So yes, I maybe, it sounds like we're kind of all kind of mixing a lot of ideas here. Something I would like to suggest to all of us is that let's all, look up and read carefully each of the policies related to public comment for our board as they currently stand. And maybe we should, at some point soon have a follow-up discussion, a follow-up agenda item that's more focused on, for these particular policies, are we using them to their full ability, or are we kind of neglecting them? If there's an option for community groups to reach out and ask for an agenda item, right? Is there a way to use that? If we have a policy that says there need to be brief follow-up, can we dig in a little bit into what would and wouldn't be acceptable for that sort of follow-up, so that we, at least for the policies we already have in place, really kind of have internal consensus of what they mean, how we can use them, as opposed to just being out there. I think, so I think that's maybe an interesting approach.
procedures also be in place to really think about them carefully.
One thing that we talked about at our retreat, well, about 10 months ago now, was reviewing policies more often. We just, that's unusual, we haven't done that. But that would be something to think about and maybe start with the policies that you're discussing. I suspect that we could talk about this all day. I would like to suggest that, if the board is okay with it, I have to call John Ashley on another issue. I will call John, the executive director of the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. I will ask him if he knows of any boards that are doing, something like number one. We know that some are doing, number two, and ask him if that's successful or what are the dangers, if you will, in that, and report back. Beyond that, I guess I would suggest that if somebody wants to bring an agenda item for a vote of something that you want to do out of this, that you can bring that back at the next meeting by following the procedure of getting something on the agenda.
In your conversation with John Ashley, could you also ask people if they're willing to name districts or name people on the school, or who have implemented things like that in case you or some of us wanted to, reach out to the public?
I'm sure, ask essentially for references, if you will.
Yeah, ask them for
Okay,
references.
sure,
Ask them where
okay,
to talk to.
sure, okay, yes, I can do that. Yeah.
Also, it would be, talk to us to see what that's like for them if they're shooting.
I'm sure that Tim would be more than happy to talk, the board president, there would be more than happy to talk with anyone, he's always more than happy to talk.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else on that agenda item for sure?
Tim said, 9 of us aren't gonna email this gentleman, right? Like,
Yes.
and ask the same question, or like.
Tim would get a kick out of that.
Will you?
It's up to you guys, I can give Tim a call, and you can, if someone else wants to take it on. Okay.
The conversation,
We can have a, I can have a
because
conversation.
I could just see 5 of us trying to call the same time.
That's why I
I
think it's good to talk to the person.
Yeah.
I think the president's the most logical person, in my mind.
Sorry?
I think the president's the most logical
Okay.
person to get information.
All right, we can do that.
Thanks, Aaron.
Moving on, discuss policy 163.1, school board memberships. As Angie said earlier, you may remember last year this came before us. We are currently a member of a national association that during the COVID time, if you will, the pandemic, kind of got a black eye, and many of the states have gone away from that particular association. My recommendation would be that we do, because Wisconsin is one of those states that went away from that National School Boards Association, that we do as well, so that we're the members of the same association that WSB is a member of, and that's called the Consortium of State School Boards Association, or COST. That's my recommendation. You can see in the attachment how I would recommend changing the policy, because it is policy that currently that would be a member of the National School Boards Association, but I would suggest change that to be the Consortium of State School Boards Associations.
Looking at the website, Wisconsin's not really listed, but is it, that's accurate that wasn't listed?
They did at the school board convention.
Oh, they
That
did.
was my question.
Yes.
Okay.
So when I saw this agenda item come up, I was like, okay, let me learn about the organization. It's, so a couple of things that struck me, it's brand new. It does not yet even have like a executive board. In fact, I think they're going to elect it in a couple of weeks, their first meeting. So it's an inaugural meeting for this organization at the beginning of April. So there's not, a present board of directors, or there's not a present board of executives to look into. So what I did is I said, okay, well, they already have their speaker list. Well, it's me to figure out who they're inviting to speak. It seemed like there are some interesting characters there. I think overall, it's I don't see any sign of, partisanship or extremism of any form. It seems very similar to sort of, see it WASB or something else. A mixture of, public policy discussion, ways the boards operate, of effective collaboration and an education policy and kind of, the sort of motivational speaker stuff. I found that encouraging. I'm reluctant to even say this, but I suspect that at that meeting, every single speech is going to have the joke "rocking the Cosmo" in it. So just be ready for that if we didn't do it during this. But so anyway, it seems like a fine organization. I think it's brand new though. So one thing is that it is sort of almost unknown how it's going to evolve this organization. So I just want to emphasize the fact that this organization seems to have a lot of states training right away, but it's just forming. And so in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, in the wake of that first meeting, there'll be a lot of things going into motion that at this point are almost completely unpredictable. We don't know who's going to be in the room and when at the meeting and so on. So it's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of betting on the sports career of a newborn, right? But I also don't see any, conflict with it. It seems reasonable.
I would not have put it on the agenda had our state organization not joined it. To me, that gives it that credence.
I trust WASB, so I would say I would go for it. Just for that reason, because I think you might trust somebody like all those people that pretty well work in that area. Also, we're not voting on it tonight, it's just a discussion. So who knows, and by the time we do get to vote on it, they might already have one things in place. And,
On that note, I wonder if, traditionally we would have that for a vote at the next meeting, and I wonder if there's a value to holding off until after that inaugural convention happens, at which point we might know more about the, some policies that they're
We naturally will because we don't have a meeting until after that convention.
Oh, is that
That convention, I think, is on the 30th of March to the 4th of April.
It's like a week different than the other one, and that's what we're calling it for, so
Just staying.
just staying.
What is the cost?
I'm sorry, I don't, I assume that it's reasonably the same, but I don't.
But okay, from what you're saying is we're going to take policy that we're not going to part of the SBA anymore. So,
Absolutely, yeah, we would not.
yeah, so that's, so right there, that's taking money away, saving money, but we can put it towards the other organization. Yeah, assuming that more,
For that reason, I didn't.
assuming that we go on to do that.
Well, I don't think this is the most. I think there was definitely were upset this afternoon and found no claims from me. We're going to try to do it. So I'm guessing in 2 weeks they'll vote on what their fee should be.
And this was something we also might learn more about in 2 weeks. I am curious in terms of, we know there's sort of a constellation of things that both husband and NSD do that are more or less similar. I'm curious when it comes to policy and advocacy work. Like as an organization that's been formed, I think it's fair to say like more or less in reaction to MSBA. If, for example, the two organizations are advocating around the same policies, which might very well happen at the federal level, will they be like each other, or will they be working together, or what will be the how will that dynamic play out? I'm kind of curious about that, and a little bit hesitant because of that.
But that dynamic will play out either way. If we continue in the National School Board Association, COSBO will be working with or not. If we go to COSBO, they'll be working with or not the National School Board Association. So either way, that conflict could be there.
Sure, that makes sense. I guess it's whether or not yeah, you're right. I guess either way the conflict is there is whether, in what way are we paying?
Well, what this reminds me of is for decades, there was one organization basically nationally that would survey hospitals. once you're surveyed, right, then you get your CMS certification, whatever. A few years ago, another group came on scene, right, and all of a sudden there was competition. We started to notice better service from the one that vendors were. So, you know, competition often breeds better for everyone, right, in both organizations. So,
Same with the telephone companies, like you probably, this was probably 4 years time, but I can remember when the telephone companies were only one telephone company, Bell Telephone, that was it. And then they broke it all up, and then now you have Sprint and, you know, whatever, AT&T and everything.
Right, but this isn't a consumer service, it's an advocacy, you know, and again, it's just in as much as they're talking about like support and networking and education for school boards, I'm not worried about that. I think, yeah, in that case, we would want the better. But when it comes to specifically talking about advocacy, like, is there gonna be a situation where one organization's lobbyists are undermining the other? Or what, you know, what kind of messages are going to raise the service law implications would be? Yeah.
well, I think that's our due diligence. If we do switch, then pay attention to how that plays out.
Yeah.
You know, I do see too, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, like pretty much all the states around us have switched over as well.
And just like we are recommending, I am recommending that we change the topic for now. If you don't like it, 2 years from now, you can change back, right? Not that you want to flip flop all the time, but let it play out, see how we do.
Can you remind me when our yearly membership is renewed?
I think usually the board takes action on membership in April, and then the board is put it in place. But in terms of paying for them, July.
I would like to, I think I hear what the things you're saying. I think it's obvious, but obviously I would like to know how much the membership. And that's me for the conferences too.
So we meet again on April 10th, I think by April 10th, we can have more information. And at that point, we put on the agenda, and if the board is ready, the board could take action. If the board wants to wait, the board can wait. Sounds good? All right.
Let's move on then to the reviewing extracurricular staff contract request.
So this is standing agenda item, unless there's questions. we can continue to move forward.
Any discussion? All right. Items related to the next meeting date. Before I go to that, I'd like to remind you all of the April 6th meeting at CISA 11. It is the Joint Superintendent Board of Education meeting. Starts at 6 p.m. for the lake. 6:30 dinner, 7:15 Mike Berry. We're talking about school finance 101. If you want to attend, email Jenny by noon tomorrow.
Yeah, we already shared this with board members a while back, and this is kind of the last call. I think the agency, so if anybody else wants to go, email me by noon tomorrow, or tell her tonight before you leave. We need to register our spots and say if whoever wants to go. It certainly is not a requirement, it's just kind of a networking opportunity with a speech. So it's really up to you whether or not you have time or evening to go.
Then other meetings, the QIC meeting on the 3rd, of course, the election on the 4th, the meeting that we just discussed on the 6th, middle school on the 7th, board meeting on the 10th, and then a bunch of committee meetings after that.
One thing to point out, Charlie, on April 19th, our school district is once again hosting the WASB new school board member gathering. So again, that's going to be April 19th, that'll be at the middle school. And that's not just for new school board members. So anybody, any board member that wants to go and meet new school board members and hear the presentation and maybe ask people from out long how to do public comment or whatever it might be, that opportunity is there for anybody who wants to attend. In the library of the middle school, April 17th, 7 p.m.
And we post that, so you don't have to worry about form.
19th, so
What did I say?
It's 19.
It's the 19th, I apologize.
What time?
7 p.m. It's right in board docs, item G,
Oh, okay.
so you can. And WASB this, Wasby has been sending notices on, I'm sure you'll get 3 of them before then.
Oh, I see.
3 of them for the end of the night.
I see. Like,
Decibel system.
We post that, so we don't have to worry about form.
We could.
Because last year we had quite a few different. All right. So, let's, take about a 5-minute break and then we'll move into closed session.